Hi, folks. My name is Girish Bali, the host for Back to Basics, another Back to Basics for another week for season 3. Today, we're going to talk about money struggles. Now, it is a tough thing to do because we don't know when to spend, how to spend, and how to save. Those are the struggles that we deal with. Sometimes we say that we're going to spend this much and save this much. We don't know what that is. So, why don't we find out today with our guest? Her name is Tiffany Grant. Let's get to know her better. Let's talk to her, chit chat with her, understand who she is and what she is. And today is definitely Valentine's Day. So, happy Valentine's Day to everyone for season 3. Let's talk to Tiffany and let's get to know her better. Today, we're going to talk to Tiffany Grant and we're going to talk about money talks, as I said earlier. Earlier today, I did say that we're going to talk about struggles of money, how to get away from that. So let's talk to Tiffany and let's chit chat and get to know her better as to why is it money talks, not talking money with Tiffany. So Tiffany, how are you? Thanks for coming to Back to Basics.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so honored. You and I have been trying to connect since last year, and finally you're here in season 3. Tiffany, thank you again for dealing with me.
You are quite all right. Usually it's the other way around. Usually it's me. So I feel good that it's not me this time.
So guys, before we start, Tiffany has just apologized to me. Just an FYI. No, I'm kidding. She's an amazing person. So before we start to talk about the money talks and the struggles and everything else, Tiffany,
Mhm.
what does back to basic mean to you?
Yeah, so back to basics mean just back to getting to the ground floor, right? So, when you think about back to basics, you think, okay, let's get to, and of course, I have a financial lens at all times, like I just can't snap out of it. So, I'm thinking, okay, let's get to what our money story looks like and how that has influenced us. I also think about, okay, do we know how our money flows? That's another basic. And then also, do we know what our money's doing currently? I feel like that's a basic as well. So when you say back to basics, for me, I automatically put a financial lens on, and that's exactly what my brain goes to.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you so much, Tiffany, for that. But when you say financial lens, what type of glasses do you wear when you do that?
Yeah, so they are actually, I was born with them, I think. No, not born, but I would say from an early age, I've always thought about money and how it interacts with us or interacts it with me. From as little as maybe like 5 is when I remember like cutting coupons and thinking, well, dang, like this is money. Like people are just throwing these away. Like this is like 50 cent. 50 cent is a big deal to a 5-year old, especially back in the 90s when I was 5. So I'm like, you know, at that moment, it kind of clicked for me like money is a tangible thing and it's important to pay attention to.
Mhm.
So that's kind of, when that lens came into play.
But Tiffany, thank you for that. So, were you interested in money is because you wanted to spend, or did you wanted to save? Because it's tough
I
in the young age. You want to spend, 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 and then talk about the money that you don't have in your pocket. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I will say, when I was younger, I wanted to spend other people's money, like all kids, right?
Oh,
So,
right.
so when I was younger, my mom teases me to this day, actually. Like when I was younger, I didn't like, I only wore name brands. I always wanted the best of the best. I wanted this, I wanted that. And luckily, I grew up in a house of spenders. And so it was like, ooh, open season for me now,
Mm.
when as I got older and I started making my own money and I started having to pay for my own things, that's when that whole, thing changed where I was like, okay, no, now I'm more of a super saver. So I was cutting coupons, at 16. And I was one of those extreme couponers where I would go into the store and get a whole grocery cart full of stuff for like $20. Sometimes I would go in and they would have to pay me just
Wow.
because I use so many coupons and things. So, I kind of course, as we get age and we grow and mature, I went from a spender of spending other people's money, never my own, to super saving on my own money. So
Mm,
that's kind of how the change happen.
mm,
But I've always been cognizant of making my own money, right? So going back to when I was like 5 or 6, I remember that was my first entrepreneurship I cannot get that word out, endeavor. Um, and with that, I had something called Tiffany's Cafe. And I had my first employee, which never got paid. She was actually a volunteer. It was my grandma, and she was the cook. And so I would make a whole menu
mm.
and go in the kitchen and say, well, what are you making? Go type it up and then hand it out at dinner and then come around with my piggy bank and collect my funds. So, I've always had the mind of building my own business and making my own money. But when I was younger, I never wanted to spend my own. That didn't come until later.
So thank you again, Tiffany, for explaining that. So now the question is, we kind of know your history when
Mhm.
it comes to money, but now the question is, how did you get from spending money on someone else's money? That's the first question, because no one really does that. Everyone spends their own money. So how did you start that process, if you don't mind?
Yeah. So, okay. So when I was spending other people's money, of course, it was when I was younger. So I was a child. So, getting to book fairs and all that stuff. So I was a nerd. But as I got older, and when I got my first job at 16, that was when my mom was like, oh, well, you have your first job. You can go ahead and take over your car payment, and all that good stuff. So that's kind of what clicked that I need to start saving, because if I didn't, then
Hmm.
I wouldn't have any money. So imagine a 16-year-old. I'm working part time because, mind you, I'm still in school, and I'm only making like $7, $7.25 an hour,
Hmm.
and I have a whole car payment.
Hmm.
So I'm grateful that my mom did do that, because it taught me early on how to manage my money, and to make sure that I had gas, and to make sure that I was able to get from point A to point B. Luckily, she did pay for the insurance, but I had to pay for the car note and I had to pay for my own gas. And so that made me super cognizant on how can I make this $7 to $7.25 an hour job stretch. And so I used to do like gas saving techniques. I would look up how to best save gas, have the windows down sometimes, have the windows up. Like, I was like on a mission to make the most of those little checks. So I think that's what kind of triggered me going from a spender to a saver. And that was at 16.
Awesome, awesome. So let me ask you this. So back in the 80s and 90s, okay, we all used to buy a car. With that car, you got to do payments, as you mentioned, you got to do gas, as you mentioned, and you got to do insurance, as you mentioned, right?
Mhm,
But your mom took care of the insurance part. Then the other two part you had to take care of, right?
mhm,
But in today's world, we don't need a car. We can just spend money on, let's say, Uber, and then get back, right?
mhm,
Do you think that's more of a savings versus anything else? Because then you don't have to worry about loans. You don't have to worry about accidents, if there is any, for insurance, running out of gas. Now you have electrical. That's a separate topic altogether. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that part?
Yeah, I think it depends, right? Because it depends on a few things. And like a good lawyer, you always say it depends, but it depends on how often you're going to be using those services. So not everyone is going to be Ubering every day, but there might be someone that is. And so if you're thinking about it, if you're like, okay, well, if I have to Uber every day to and from wherever I'm going, you kind of have to do the math and say, does this make sense versus just having a car payment every month? And then I can go to and fro as I please. But if there's someone that doesn't really go much of anywhere, kind of like myself, then, it might make more sense. So in order to evaluate things like that, and this is what I tell people to do, you want to write down the pros and cons of each solution. And so you want to think about, okay, what are the pros of doing Uber or Lyft every day? The pros are, like you said, you don't have to worry about insurance. You don't have to worry about taxes. You don't have to worry about, your car getting messed up. If they get into an accident, it's on them, so on and so forth. Now, if you think about the pros of having your own car, you don't have to wait for an Uber or Lyft every time. You can go to and from. You can do other things. Maybe you want to go on an errand. Maybe you want to go hang out with friends. All of that would add up if you do Uber and Lyft all the time. So, make a list of the pros and cons, and then also dig into the financial aspect and see which one makes more sense. Because a lot of times we make decisions not thinking them all the way through. And so that is what I have learned in my journey is I think things all the way through. Like my brain automatically goes to numbers. Like I could be sitting in a meeting. Like for instance, we just put my grandma away last week. And while I was sitting in the meeting, I was automatically just writing down, okay, and how much is the casket? Okay, and how much is it? And and I was the only one at the table doing that, but that's just how my brain operates. So I'm sitting there writing down, okay, what are our options here? What should we pick here? What's the best option? And so I highly recommend that people start getting into the habit of doing that if they can, and start thinking long-term consequences versus just short-term satisfaction. Because I think a lot of times that's what we default to, and it can kind of get us in trouble.
Yeah, that's really a shame, and sorry about your loss there too, Tiffany. So let me ask you this here: there's a pros and cons to everything what we do, right? I mean, buying a car or buying a house or whatever, right? If Tiffany has just bought a Mercedes, am I supposed to be following Tiffany what she's doing?
Absolutely not, because your money.
Because that's the thing, right? But that's just one example. The other example is Tiffany has just bought a Coach bag or a leather purse or whatever, right? Or maybe a ring that she bought, right? Am I to say that I'm supposed to be buying those stuff too because I want to follow in your footsteps?
See, no, for sure. Now, I will say Tiffany will not be buying any of those things. That's for sure. But just to, get to your point, though, unfortunately, that is the curse of social media and everything else. Like it's a gift and a curse, right? So you get to see everybody's highlight reels. So you get to see their vacations. You get to see, oh, they did a wedding on the beach. You get to see, all of these cool things. But what it's not showing you is how much this stuff costs, if they had to go into debt to do it, all these other things that are behind the scenes, because of course people aren't going to put that out there. And so when I'm looking, well, first of all, comparison is the thief of joy, right? And so if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, then you're like, oh, well, I need that to make myself feel, or oh, I need to, that's something that I need, or I need to do this. And usually that's not the case. So what I tell people is, look, do not compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 25. You don't know what someone has gone through or what they're currently going through in order to get that highlight reel that you're seeing. And so always live below your means, not even within your means. I tell people to live below your means. So for instance, to give you an example, all throughout my corporate career and even now, I live the exact same way that I lived when I was making like $10 an hour, right? So my expenses haven't really moved too much. They're pretty sticky for the most part. Now, technology is my weakness. So that kind of fluctuates, but everything else, I kind of keep it really low to live below my means, because once you have a deficit between how much you make and how much you spend, then you start getting in trouble. And, a lot of people experience lifestyle creep. It is a thing. That means the more you make, the more you spend. And unfortunately, that is typically how things go. Now, you can always work around that. So, like me, I learned early on that I don't care what other people think. When I had my car at 16, I had that car until I totaled it when I was like 20 something. Like it was already paid for. I would have still been driving that car to this day, to be honest with you. But it's like, I don't care what other people think of, what I'm driving, how I look, things like that. All of that stuff, they're not paying my bills. And
Right.
so, you kind of have to have that mindset as well, or it's easy to get sucked into what other people have and what you quote unquote don't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you again, Tiffany. So let me ask you this, and this is just an average monthly that I'm talking about. This is not an actual thing because everyone's a little different in every different country that we all live in because everyone's listening around the country, including the US, also in Canada too.
Mhm.
So the average, let's say, for internet service is $70.
Mhm.
Your TV service is like adding another $50, maybe 60 for basic only, right? And
Mhm.
we're not even talking about HBOs and Showtimes and Cinemax and all the other stuff, right? So that's from the cable company, right?
Mhm.
Then now today's world, people only take internet service. Then on top of that, they take Netflix, they take Prime, they take Disney, they take X, Y, and Z. Doesn't it get more expensive, or do you think that's the way to do it, or are we getting more demanding, or are we getting picky? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
So here's my thing, right? I feel like everybody has different values, okay? So everybody values different things. So if TV is something that you value, then by all means, have your TV, but you have to figure out, okay, where is this money coming from? So to make it real and give you an example, I had a client, okay, and they're like, oh, I want to save for vacations. I want to, pay for my cable. I want to, all these different things, go to restaurants, whatever it is that they wanted to do. Now, when we got to the bottom of how they're spending and we got to the bottom of the budget spreadsheet, they were in a negative. So I'm like, okay, what do you want to cut out? So
Mm,
now you have to start thinking to yourself, what's more important to me? Is it cable or is it vacations? Is it eating out in restaurant or is it cable? Is it, vacations or is it eating out at restaurants? You have to start making these decisions, but you won't get to that point until you realize how you're currently spending and what that actually looks like.
mm,
So I tell people, there's never any blanket statements. If you love TV, go right ahead.
mm.
But you just have to make sure that you can justify where that money is coming from.
Yeah,
So that's my biggest tip. But personally, I don't really watch anything hardly. I'm always working for the most part. And even
yeah,
if I do have downtime, I read a book or, I'm
yeah.
on social media or something like that.
Because
So,
when I'm saying cable TV, I'm talking
mhm,
even wireless. I'm talking even radio stations that we listen to, like
mhm,
Spotify, YouTube, and all that fun stuff. So, I guess you answered that nicely. That it really depends on what your needs are, right?
mhm.
At the end of the day.
Absolutely. Now, I do tell people though, make sure that you do subscription audits every so often, because I know, for instance, I know I have let a subscription go a little too long where I wasn't really using it, but they were still taking my money. So I would say every at least month, do a subscription audit and make sure that you're actually using the things that you are getting charged for. And if not, go ahead and cancel it. There, even if you, because I run into people and I also say sometimes myself, oh, but I'll use it next month. Oh, but I'll use it. I'll use it. Well, guess what? You can always resubscribe next month. So if you're not using it currently, just let it go. And that can actually save you a ton of money. I've sat down with people and we were just tracking what they were spending, and it's like $100, $200 just in subscriptions,
Mm,
because that's the way the world is operating right now. And the reason is because they make a lot of money doing it. So of course they're going to keep doing it, and everybody's going to jump on that bandwagon. So make sure you do a subscription audit at least once a month, just to make sure that you are using everything that you pay for.
yeah. Well, thank you again for that, Tiffany. I want people to understand that back in the days, we used to wait for a technician to come to go and enable whatever. And nowadays you can just enable from your phone, from internet right away, right? So
Mhm.
if you can cancel today. If you can enable it today. I mean, if you have a show which is releasing tomorrow, you can really do it tomorrow instead of just today. I mean, that's just how easy it is. Yes, you might have to cancel today and it'll take you maybe a few days to cancel completely because that's the billing cycle, but
Mhm.
that's okay, isn't it? I mean, that's just part of life.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, audit is the way to go.
Yeah.
Now, Tiffany, thank you again for answering that. So let me ask you this, and I've got this. A lot of different people have different answers when it comes to credit cards. Okay, now credit cards is a evil or is it a good thing to use that tool to get your cash back or plain to, rewards program or even a cash back from, let's say, Costco's or Sam's Clubs, depending on where anyone is? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like I said, any good lawyer, it depends. No. But it truly depends though, seriously, because if you're not good with credit and using it as a tool and you're using credit as income, like you're like, oh, free money, choo, 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 then of course I'm going to tell you, no, don't do that. Like, actually, don't use them at all. Go ahead and pay off your credit card debt. And then once you have more discipline, then you can start using it for rewards and stuff. Now, I do believe that you can use credit as a tool. And I know a lot of people that do, like the flights and everything, the points and the rewards. But the issue is if people aren't disciplined enough and they try to do those strategies and techniques and trying to get bonuses and all that stuff, they can set themselves up for a world of trouble. So I always say, if you have the discipline, by all means, go right ahead. But if you don't, then don't try to jump into it yet. Just go ahead and get that part under control. And
Mm.
then you can always do it later. So that's kind of like, for instance, with me, I don't really get into the whole points and rewards and stuff. Now, when I do have them, like, occasionally, because I only use my card occasionally, when I do have them, I'm like, oh, cool. Like, for instance, I just bought something from Sam's Club today with some of my Sam's cash. Um, but it's like, for me, it's very rare. But I
Mm.
do know people that do it and how they do it. So here's a tip. If you are to that level and you want to do that, they will pay for things like, for instance, their rent or their mortgage or what have you, but they make sure that the money is there. And so what they do is they pay it and then they pay it right off pretty much immediately, because you do not have to carry a balance on any of these cards. I just want to make sure that's clear because that's another misconception that's out there. You do not have to carry a balance to improve your credit score or, any of that stuff. You can pay this stuff off immediately. So only use your credit card for what you have in your bank account. And then that way you can keep yourself out of trouble and then just pay it off immediately. So that's how some of my friends that I know, how they travel, hack, and do all that stuff, is that they go ahead and put it on the credit card just so they can get the points, get the rewards, and then they pay it right off
Mm.
afterwards. So if you do want to do that, by all means, go right ahead. But like I said, personally, I don't get into all of that. I'm just like, old fashioned. Just let me not have any debt and call it a day.
Of course, I totally agree with that. Tiffany, thank you again for that. So, season 3, we came out with a new segment, and the segment is a rapid fire.
Okay.
And I'm gonna ask you some few words, and you tell me what comes right after that. And it could be a story, or it could be anything related to what we're talking today. Okay, finance lens.
Finance lens, I feel like everybody has one, and you need to figure out what that looks like for you. So that way you can kind of use your money in a way that best serves you and doesn't serve these other companies that are in your pockets.
Okay, money flows.
Money flows. Ooh. So that's my reaction. Ooh. No, but money flows, I think about, your cash flow. So like your monthly cash flows, what that looks like, how much money is coming in, how much money goes out. That's kind of what I feel when I hear money flows.
Nice. Money doings.
Hmm. Money doings. What is your money doing for you? That's kind of that was like my first thought. And you kind of think about it like if your money doesn't have a job, like if you're not telling it what to do every month, and that's why cash flow, whatever you want to call it, budget. I call it budget. We're just gonna call it budget. Um, that's why a budget is so important because you're telling your money what you want it to do. If your
Mm.
money doesn't have a job, it's just going to sit there until it just does whatever it wants. And then you're going to look up and you're going to be like, well, dang, I don't have any money. Well, you never gave it a job. So, but anyway, that's what I think about.
Social media.
I love it. Yeah, that's an addiction of mine. So that's what I think about. I love social media. I'm all over social media. I feel like it can be a gift and a curse, though. Like I said before, you might get that FOMO, or trying to keep up with people and, seeing their highlight reel. But for me as a business owner, I love it because it helps me make money. So, there's kind of two different sides to social media, but I feel like if you can use what you're good at and what you love to do in order to make money, then you might as well do it. So that's what I
Yeah.
think about.
Lifestyle creep.
Yes. So like I said before, that's when you make more money and then you start spending more money, and so as every time you get raises you're spending more and more and more and more, and so it's like even though you got the raise, it's not helping you in any way. So always spend less than what you make, and even going a step further, spend way less than what you make, and then you can save more and invest more and do more things with it.
Awesome, awesome. And last word for the rapid fire is Tiffany Grant.
That's me. No. So yes, money nerd, money talk with Tiff. I love educating people about money and how to spend, save, invest, whatever it is they would like to do with it. I just love educating people. I'm a teacher at heart. I'm a mom. There's so many different adjectives and stuff I could use to describe myself, but I just love making money fun and interesting. So hopefully I did that today.
Awesome. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So, Tiffany, before you leave, is there any book that you're reading related, not related to anything? And maybe share what Tiffany's doing nowadays when it comes to reading.
Yeah, I'm an audiobook person for the most part. I mean, I did go to the library yesterday with my boys and I picked up something new. But the audiobook that I'm reading on Audible, I guess listening to, is The Creature from Jekyll Island. And what that's about is how the Federal Reserve was created, which is very, very interesting. It was actually just created by a whole bunch of rich guys meeting up on this island and saying, you know what, let's make a Federal Reserve. And that's how our money's governed today. So it's just interesting that that's how it started. So that's what that book is about, how those people got together and started the Federal Reserve Bank.
Wow, wow. Amazing, amazing. I'm going to go and catch that book and I'm going to find out. I mean, is there a conspiracy or is it a theory?
No, it's real. It's real life.
There you go. There you go. Thank you.
It's a long read, I will warn you. Like for instance, on Audible, I think it's like 26 hours of listening. So it's long. That's why I haven't finished it yet. But it is very interesting. And, to know that this is how the US is actually still functioning to this day. And it
Mm.
was just created by a handful of rich guys at the time, to me is crazy. It's very interesting.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you again, Tiffany, for that. And before you leave, how was your journey on Back to Basics? And do you have any last words to all my listeners and my viewers for Back to listeners?
Yeah, I love all of these questions and stuff that you gave me. This was an awesome interview. Last thoughts, I will say if you are interested in learning more about personal finance, more about money, you can always visit my website, moneytalkwitht.com, or the podcast, Money Talk with Tiff. Or, like I said, social media is my addiction. So I'm at Money Talk with T on all platforms. And if you cannot find something on my site that is what interests you, then let me know and I'll create it because I like to teach about all things money. So those are my last thoughts.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tiffany, for coming here. I'm so joyed that I finally got to chat with you. I mean, it took us almost a year just to get each other. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for supporting me on the small podcast that I have for Back to Basics.
Absolutely, I can now check it off my bucket list.
There you go. Thank you again for that. So guys, we spoke with Tiffany today and we talked about the basics of money, didn't we? And we talked about that, well, yes, there is struggles. Yes, there is hard times, but then there's also a good side to it, as we said, right? There's always baby steps when it comes to money and saving money and spending money also at the same time. Now, as usual, there is a quote for a day for Back to Basics, and hopefully Tiffany will like this quote. Money speaks sense in a language all nations understand. Am I saying that there's no language when it comes to money? Money is just money, isn't it? And that's what we're saying. So as usual, as always, what do we always say at the end of the episode? Everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care. God bless. Keep on commenting and support me all the way through. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time on Back to Basics. Hi guys, thank you again for tuning in to Back to Basics and listening to the excellent episode that we had today with our guest. You know, with your love and support, we do need you to at least rate our show, review our show, because it does make us stronger day by day, week by week, as I usually say on my episodes. And there are 3 things in this episode that it makes a hit for me, which is the content, the guest, and definitely the host. So guys, take care, God bless, and remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did today, guys. Guys, take care, God bless, and see you next time on Back to Basics.